So, without further ado, Dr. Luskin.
You know, it is still very peculiar to be introduced as Dr. somebody. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I was born Fred, you know, it's like this doctor stuff, this weird stuff. But anyway, I appreciate the respect from it. You know, I myself and a partner came to Hawaii 2-3 times a year for almost 15 years, give or take, to do trainings, which is how we met Susan. We got grants from the state to teach forgiveness, to train forgiveness teachers. It was really wonderful to come here so regularly. I mean, it was a wonderful experience. And the coronavirus put an absolute end to that. I mean, we were headed here for April, and the coronavirus came, and anyway. So this is my first time back in 4 years. And it's not sunny enough for me if anybody's interested, but other than that, it's fine. I'm also here. Susan is planning a conference with us and with a number of people for next February on forgiveness, centered in Hawaii. And I told her that I'd be just happy to do some talks to, play up forgiveness and just talk about it, which is what brought me here. I'm willing to go on the road a little bit, so to speak. I've been teaching forgiveness for a very long time and have given hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of talks on forgiveness. I remember, and then I'll talk a little more about forgiveness, but the first time I came to the islands to talk about forgiveness, I gave a book talk right after my book came out. I think my book came out in 2001, and I was invited here 2002, and I was interviewed by one of the TV stations, and I mean, this was just so remarkable to me. I remember the guy, the interview wasn't live, and we probably did the interview 10 o'clock at night, and so we started to talk. And this is still hard for me to believe. I have to check my brain a bit, but he told me then in Honolulu, you guys were still getting TV shows a week later, that they came by video. And I remember thinking, holy shit. He was showing me that some of the national broadcasts were not aired the exact same week that they were in, San Francisco. And I thought, wow, what a fascinating thing. I run something called the Stanford Forgiveness Project. I've directed that for a long time. This is a Buddhist place. I have a 40-plus year meditation practice myself, not necessarily centered on Buddhism, but have been meditating regularly since college. Have given numerous talks in Buddhist places. In fact, for a while, a Buddhist teacher named Rick Hansen and I would give talks at Spirit Rock together on, it was interesting, the interface between Buddhism and forgiveness. And after all these years, the isms don't matter to me that much. It's and this is not the deepest of pontificating, but I've met people who have so many different isms. I've been all over the world teaching this stuff, and everybody's got their ism, and you have to be really careful about the people who hold their ism too closely, because they start thinking their ism is so different than everybody else's ism, and their ism is better, and then they start telling everybody why they should be not the one ism they like, but the one this person likes. And it's made me a little chary. And just one more anecdote before I talk a little bit more about forgiveness. When we started our project at Stanford, and this is my Stanford uniform, I teach meditation to the women's basketball team, of which this is. So it's really fun. And right now, one of the teams that I'm working with is the beach volleyball team, and they're in the Pac-12 finals or semifinals right now, and I teach them meditation as well. But when we started our project, I was a graduate student. That's how long ago this was. And the major professor was somebody who supported what I was doing, which is wonderful. And he also was a meditator. And both of us were very drawn to spiritual things, very drawn. And we taught Stanford's first class together that had the word spirit in it. We called it Mind, Body, and Spirit back like 30 years ago. And we were teaching meditation to undergraduates when it was weird stuff. But our first thought was, should we do forgiveness as a secular intervention or as a kind of religious, spiritual intervention? And we were favoring the religious piece because we figured, well, how could you go wrong if you're like connecting it to God or spirit? Well, we found that very quickly how you could go wrong. Because we would talk to Buddhists and they would tell us how much this reminded them of Buddhism, but that we had to be very careful to know how different they were than Christians. And then we talked to Christians, and they would tell us how important it was to remember that Christianity was the number one thing. And so what we found is we created a lot of arguments among religious types about what forgiveness was, and they couldn't forgive the other religions for not quite being as sharp as they were. And so that ended our interest in any kind of religious orientation to forgiveness, and we chose to be entirely secular in our teaching. Entirely secular. For me personally, my forgiveness training comes from my own deep wounding many years ago. I had an experience where I was mistreated in a way that it took me 4 or 5 years to get over it, and it was horrifying. I had an abandonment and a betrayal by one of the closest people in my life, and it just flipped my world. I lost hope. I became somewhat bitter, and the world no longer was safe. It just, because I wasn't safe inside, the world wasn't safe. And I wasn't safe because I couldn't trust one of the people that I thought would be trustworthy, like, as long as I lived. That helped me teach forgiveness, that devastation, because I recognized that upheaval is at the absolute heart of why people don't forgive. That their world of what they depend on, believe in, the picture they have of how the world should unfold gets shattered. And some of us are better able to put back together than others. So if you come into the experience not that well put together, you're going to have a much harder time putting yourself back together after you get shattered. They have found the same thing with PTSD. The less coherent and stable the personality structure is before a PTSD-inducing experience, the more difficult it is after to put back together. So I dug myself out of a very deep pit of suffering. And I can remember the day that got catalyzed, even though I suffered. I mean, I suffered for years, and At the end of it, I came up with an understanding, me being now a forgiveness teacher, I validated that old maxim, those who can't teach. Because that was my claim to fame for forgiveness. Me, I can't do it, so I might as well teach other people. My wife came to me one day. This is a long time ago. She came to me and she said, Fred, I love you a lot. I just don't like you as much. What happened was years ago, and you're not the person I thought you were. That when I married you and I chose to join my life with you, I expected more resilience and more grit and more character than you're showing. And I'm not threatening you. I mean, she wasn't threatening. She's not that kind of person. But I'm letting you know that I'm disappointed, that this is years and you're carrying this and it's not yours. You shouldn't be carrying this for so long. And this came from a patient, kind-hearted, non-hostile person. And it was, I couldn't shake it off. I couldn't shake that off. What do you do with that when somebody you deeply respect basically tells you you're an asshole? I mean, she didn't say that, but that's what she was saying. Fred, you're an asshole. Get over it. But she was too nice to say that. When I started teaching forgiveness, I wasn't that nice. I'd say to somebody, you're an asshole. Get over it. But it deeply challenged me, deeply. Because I knew she was right, but I didn't fully know how to get from here to here. I knew she was right, and I found out something which was very uncomfortable for me, even though it's been validated by hundreds of people, that often meditation practice is not sufficient to help us forgive. It's not enough. It's not enough of a tool in the quiver. It's a tool, and it's an essential tool, but it's not enough. I remember I was giving a talk at Spirit Rock one time, Spirit Rock's a well-known Buddhist teaching place in Northern California, and Jack Kornfield and Sylvia Boorstein and a lot of the originators of at least American Buddhism helped start that place. But I'm giving a talk there. There's probably 300 people there. And I'm informal, as you can see when I talk. I mean, there's nothing formal about me. But I saw all these Buddhists, sitting and meditating really straight. Like they were showing me that we're real Buddhists here. So we don't move and our backs are straight, which is great. I mean, it's wonderful. It just doesn't make you a real Buddhist. It's just you can sit straight in meditation. You still could be in, But I looked at them and I was, kidding around. And I said, I look at you and I know that many of you here who have had a long meditation history, as have I. I told them I've meditated twice a day, 99% of the days since I was in college. So that's a meditation practice. That's not trivial. And I said, I know as well as you know that change is slow. You have to be incredibly patient, and sometimes it's not enough for your healing and peace. And I said, for me, it wasn't enough. And so I had to figure out some things about forgiveness. And don't let anything in what I'm saying disavow my respect for meditation. I've taught meditation on Stanford's campus now for decades. I know the research pretty well about its effectiveness. But we also have to take part of ourself almost by the hand and say, you can get over yourself in order to forgive. You're not the center of the universe. People suffer everywhere. If you have an exaggerated attention on your suffering, that's understandable. It's unfortunate. But that has to stop for you to be okay. You have to take yourself out of the center of the universe. And that's not easy when you've been hurt. Many of us love to hold our wounds as if they're really precious. Yeah, this is when Dad wasn't nice, and this is when the ex-husband was a bum. And oh, here's the delicious one when my boss was not righteous. And we put we give them nice little places to live in our minds, and we feed them well. And we nourish our grievances. And they become part of our personhood. Hi, I'm Fred. I had a crappy mother. That's often how we introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm Fred, the guy who had a terrible first marriage or whatever. Or you wouldn't believe my mother-in-law. Hi, I'm Fred. But that is poisonous. It's a poison that affects our whole world, everywhere. Look at me, I've been harmed. Look at me, I'm special because of the way I've been harmed. Look at me, my harm is more precious than your harm. Look at me, even though every single age of human beings and every single culture has suffered in the exact same way throughout all of human history. Nothing has changed at all in that way. Let me tell you how bad it was for me. Meditation is not enough to cure that. It's not. It's really nice to become aware and to separate a bit from our thoughts or to focus our attention. I don't know how people exist without that personally. Life is hard enough even when you have a practice. But it's not enough for our identification as a victim. It is not enough. And the heart of what's wrong with unforgiveness is our identification as a victim. That I have been victimized by this. Short term, that is an essential component of the process of healing. Short term, identifying our own victimhood is a very, very valuable thing. Long term, it's bad news for your emotional and physical health. That's what the Stanford Forgiveness Project has done over these years, is do research to show how it's now good for you. Affects your cardiovascular function and affects your blood pressure and your levels of pain tolerance and, makes your laundry better if you forgive. It's got amazing properties. But if you don't forgive, your muscles tighten. They do, they tighten. And your breathing weakens. And your brain becomes less open because of that victim identification. Poor me. Look at how bad things happen to me. In the way that I look at this now, it's the orthogonal opposite from Buddhist compassion. Buddhist compassion, like all compassion, but I was one of the original teachers for Stanford C-Care, the Compassion Project started by the Dalai Lama's translator. All of our suffering's the same. Yeah. May I wish you well. May I wish me well. May you be safe. May I be safe. We're all the same. So my suffering's not that different than your suffering. It may come in a little different flavor, like I like chocolate and you might like vanilla. suffering. And Buddhists know about suffering. I'm not minimizing that. But that identification as a victim distorts your perception. And it makes you think that whatever it is that you think has victimized you is unique and special. And by doing that, you cut off a good part of your capacity to be compassionate. Because as the Buddhists have taught so eloquently, old age, sickness, and death are just hanging around waiting to remind you about how vulnerable you are and how you're an eye blink in this universe and you're going to suffer even if every single good thing that you ever wanted happens to you. You got old age, sickness, and just hanging out waiting to show you that it ain't exactly the way you think it is. They are very kind reminders of impermanence and your own non-uniqueness. Your own just normal experience of being a human being. And it's so sad to me that we don't teach more of this stuff to our children, to everybody, that suffering is part of the deal. It's just part of the deal. It's like a Monopoly game. When you pass go, you get $200. When you take a birth, you suffer. It's just part of the deal. And from what I've seen, the Buddhists do as good a job as anybody ever at identifying that and normalizing it and reminding everybody that this ain't kidding, folks. And they also remind us that the heart of who we think we are just thoughts. That's all it is. It's just thoughts. They're thoughts that coalesce around a body and a personality, but they're just thoughts. And you don't want to teach yourself to have that many thoughts of victimhood. And you don't want to identify with your tribe going back 7,000 years about how you've been victimized. And I'm claiming zero credit for this. I was born, 10 years after the Holocaust ended. I was, not even 10 years, yeah. And my parents had many relatives killed in the Holocaust. But from the world that they left, and then their parents had come to the United States. But, being Jewish in the 50s, you were 10 years away from where they tried to wipe out the tribe. And I knew even then, and I can't tell you why, that I didn't want that identification. And it had nothing to do with believing that the suffering wasn't intense. And that, nobody merits that. Nobody. But what I didn't want was a tribal, I couldn't have told you this at 17, but I didn't want my identity to be around suffering and we're special because we've been harmed. I didn't want that. First of all, we're not special because we've been harmed. We're just part of planet Earth. But second, it doesn't help us. It's not an effective strategy because the victim's stance, which is all it is, it's just a stance, is one of powerlessness. So when you feel powerless, your brain's not doing too good. And you're not thinking out of the box. And you're not using creative solutions. You're defending a stance of, we have been harmed. Now, having worked with all sorts of horror in this world, I'm not making any claims that people haven't been harmed and they haven't been persecuted, for their gender, their race, their ethnicity, their religion. People have persecuted other human beings for any reason and every reason. You know, we did a couple of research projects in Sierra Leone where we listened to people tell us about like little 10-year-old kids with submachine guns wandering around shooting things. And, you know, I did a forgiveness thing not that long after the attacks of 9/11 at the World Trade Center, and I sat in a room with people whose partners had been blown up in the, you know, this is not me minimizing the horrors that human beings do to other human beings. It's me trying to remind people, understand that the horror is part of this, and grieve it, feel it, but then don't hold an identification as an injured person for longer than you need to grieve it. You need to grieve it. You need to feel the pain. You need to hold the wound, and you need to offer sympathy to other people who have been wounded. But you don't want that identity. You want to be more in process. You know, yes, we were harmed. You know, I remember when I was beginning teaching this stuff, and forgiveness scares people. It does. It scares people. Because holding a grudge is one of our ego's like pseudo methods of power. I'm pissed off at you. Okay, fine. But that makes people feel important. It does. And it makes them feel like they're doing something. It's like, you harmed my people 400 years ago, so I'm going to be pissed off now, as if that does something for the poor people who were harmed 400 years ago. When loving kindness would do a lot more, and that's what I got out of C-Care. Loving kindness will do a lot more. If you want to heal from wound, open your heart. My own hope was when I started this, that since we were doing an entirely secular project, I wanted to create a forgiveness teaching that somehow got across the values of Jesus somehow on the cross saying, "Forgive them, they know not what they do," which is some of the most astounding words that any human being could say. Forgive them, they know not what they do. There's a Gordon Lightfoot song from many years ago where one of the lyrics is about Jesus. They treated him so badly, how could he wish them well? Well, from my point of view, that would be a great case study for us all to ponder. They treated him so badly, how could he wish them well? Which has nothing to do with being a Christian. That's an amazing life. But the other piece that I wanted to hold the space of was metta practice, loving kindness. Those two. For me, those were the spiritual inspirations of this. How could a human being who's being unjustly tortured wish people well? And at that point, I was still having trouble forgiving traffic. You know, I'm just saying, if Jesus standing there can forgive people who are strangling him, I should do a little better with traffic. Just a little. And then loving kindness practice. Wish for everybody what you want for yourself. The golden rule. Wish for everyone what you want for yourself. That's ultimately what forgiveness is, which is why the Buddhists teach it. You want everybody to heal. You don't want anybody to suffer. If you don't like suffering, why would you want somebody else to suffer? I've never quite figured out that leap, because I've sat with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of angry people who are pissed off because they're suffering, but they want to make other people suffer. I've never quite figured that one out, why something doesn't go along, some alarm doesn't come off and say, hey, does this make any internal sense to you? Because it doesn't to me. But metta practice. You want to be happy? I want to be happy. So does the person who harmed you. People pick some very peculiar ways to make themselves happy. Very peculiar. And some people are evil. I don't understand the spiritual definition of evil, but I understand M. Scott Peck's definition of evil from the people of the lie, which that some people deliberately try to harm others. Most people simply harm others accidentally because they're so self-absorbed. Most harm is accidental, based on not even seeing other people, because the focus is so much on the self. Most people who cheat on their partners don't even notice their partner. It's all about them. Most people who steal do so for themselves. They're not interested in who they're stealing from. Most of our insensitive unkindness is because we're over-focused on us and don't see the rest of the world. So that's an essential corrective. If I want to be happy, at least remember that you too want to be happy. So those were the two, I'm going to say, spiritual sources of wanting to teach forgiveness. For me, the two transformative moments were this. Once I decided that I needed my wife to like me, and it's funny because I can kid about this now. We weren't married that long. I think we were married 5 years. I know couples who have been married 30 years who couldn't care less if their partners liked them. 30 years. But we were married 4 years and we had a baby. And so, of course I want her to like me. So I was trying to figure out, how do I do this? And one day I'm in a terrible mood, just a terrible mood. And I'm in a job I don't like. And I come home. My wife meets me at the door. She said, Fred, you need to go and buy me this food, and you need to go to Albertsons or Safeway. I think it was Safeway. And I told her, being in a pissy mood, I don't want to go to Safeway. I want to go to Lucky's or whatever it was. Because this was my mood. Lucky's was 400 feet closer. I don't remember exactly how much closer it was, but it was like a tenth of a mile. And me being an idiot at that time, I made a point to tell her that I really didn't want to go to Safeway because it was too far. So she looks at me and said, Fred, the item I need is only at Safeway. And she's emphatic, and she's literally bored to death by my crankiness because I was in a job that I didn't like, and I'm just cranky. So I trudge out the door feeling sorry for myself because I have to go all the way to Safeway. It's hard to even believe when you look back on your own bad moods, isn't it? You can't believe what a jerk you were, and you took it so seriously, and you were so strong about it. My God, she just doesn't understand me. Of course, any normal person would want to go to Albertsons or Lucky's. They wouldn't want to trudge all the way up to the Himalayas to Safeway. That's how I'm acting. I get out of my car. It's Christmas time. There's another moment for an asshole, is I didn't even notice it was Christmas. All I noticed is all the cars in the parking lot. So I'm even more pissed off. I go to Safeway. I walk in, I miss everything. I miss the guys like spraying the produce. I don't see anything except the aisle where this thing that my wife wants me to get isn't there. I come to the aisle, I walk up and down the aisle, it's not there. And I'm thinking to myself, God, the world is conspiring to make me miserable. Except I stopped for 1 second. Like, I literally blew a gasket at that moment because I'm looking for this item. I had to go all the way. I had to take 3 planes and 7 Sherpas and to get to Safeway, and here I am, and it's not there. I turn around, the item's not there, but for 1 second, the mist clears. And I saw that I'm in Safeway. And there's 30,000 items for me to just buy. Except me still being an asshole, I say there's 30,000 minus 1. But for the first moment, the fog cleared, and I saw there's 30,000 items to buy, and I didn't see any of them. And I was humbled and humiliated, and for a moment, the clouds cleared, and I saw things clearly. I saw how much abundance you have to ignore to hold a grudge. That is probably the crucial insight that I got in this whole 30 years. You have to walk around like this. You have to walk around like this in order to hold on to your grudges. People don't recognize it, but you have to work your ass off to do this. You have to miss so much goodness, it's hard to believe. You have to miss the sunrise, and you have to miss the fact that your body works, and you have to miss that you have a brain and you're breathing, and that people love you, and you have food and running water. You have to miss all that in order to stay a victim. It is hard work, which is why it's so bad for the body. So I walk out of Safeway, and for the first moment in a long time, I'm actually seeing life clearly, which is, it's an amazing gift with a lot of shit. It's pretty close to something like that. But I see it clearly, and all of a sudden my heart opens, and why would I hold a grudge? Why would I want to hurt my own heart? Why would I want to spoil my life just because somebody was cruel or insensitive? And he did the wrong thing. And why 4 years later would I not want to see the sunrise? Or why would I want to miss having a loving wife? Or why would I want to miss the beauty of my own child? Why would I? So for that moment, I saw reality, which is that I was doing it to me. Nobody had done anything. Now, 4 years ago, somebody had done something. That morning, nobody did anything. I made that up. All me. What I chose to pay attention to, what I chose to highlight, I got my just desserts. And I earned them because I missed everything. I missed it all. I walked by, I was grouchy with my wife. She was having a great time home with our baby, so I'm annoyed with her because I have a crappy job. I missed everything. And then I didn't. And the minute you open your heart back up to what's good, you forgive. Because you recognize that you're primarily hurting yourself, and you're spoiling your capacity to be happy in the moment. Because that's all you got. You got moments, and this is the essence of meditation, you got moments. And in those moments, you can bring your mind any way you want. And I was choosing to keep on bringing it back and back and back and back and back to who had harmed me. That's not his fault. It's totally my doing. So that was insight one. The second insight, And this was even more sobering. That one wasn't sobering. That was kind of nice. Because when I got back, being really a jerk, the first thing I said to my wife was, I had to go to Lucky's to get the item you wanted because Safeway didn't have it. And then I apologized and told her I was sorry for being such an idiot and told her what happened and asked her for her forgiveness because I had missed so much and I was truly and deeply sorry. But the second one was another humbling thing, and forgiveness is all about being humbled, which is why we don't want it. It's all about humbled. The second was about this person, was after this Safeway moment, and my heart starts opening, I don't want to be pissed off, and I don't. I asked myself, Fred, does he have to be your friend? Does he have to behave the way you think? Clearly, he didn't believe what you believed. He thought he should do X. You thought he should do Y. You punished him because he chose Y. You didn't like Y. But did he have to do X? Or was that just your thing? And I realized that it was just my thing. And then I asked myself an even more horrible question. So, Fred, during these 4 years, did you ever wish him well? How was your behavior? It was horrible. Did you ever wish him well? Did you ever be the person you wanted him to be? The answer was no. So I said, why would you want him to be a better friend than you are? Where'd that come from? You never, ever, 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 ever just said, hey, go in grace, be happy, whatever. So, Fred, if it's that hard for you to be a friend, why don't you give him that same privilege? It was hard for him, and I did. I forgave him because he's probably as big a jerk as I am. We were jerks together. And I came back to life. And I took what I had learned and started the Stanford Forgiveness Project. And started teaching forgiveness all over the world. And I've learned a bit since 25, 30 years ago, so I now sound a hell of a lot more sophisticated than I did then. But the essence hasn't changed. You forgive for you, not for them. You clear your mind, not theirs. And you bring your attention back to the present. You take it away from the past, so you're not a victim. It's not that complicated. Let me stop my presentation piece with a very short meditation, and then I'll answer a few questions, and then I'm going to dinner. Well, no, my partner is sitting in our hotel room, and I told her I would be back. Let me find. I know you guys sent me some actually really good questions, and I want to find them. Is grief work a part of or a precursor to forgiveness? The answer is yes, absolutely. You have to grieve before you can let it go. And not grieving it is one of the reasons why people struggle to let it go. You have to feel the pain. You have to know what's happened. You have to share it. You have to do some grief work before letting it go is appropriate within the entire being. Forgiveness is not a shortcut to not feeling. You feel it, and then you feel it enough that you don't need it anymore. What is the role of forgiveness in activism work, confronting systemic and historical injustice? Yeah, I don't have a great answer to that because I'm uncomfortable with the question. systemic injustice. Human beings hurt each other all over the place. And they've been hurting each other in every continent, through every time period. So yes, there is a systemic problem. It's called being human. And that's a tough thing. It's a really tough thing. So, I mean, being Jewish, I know that Jewish people have been persecuted for hundreds and hundreds of years. I'm not sure that's always so helpful in organizing one's thinking around them. It doesn't mean you don't work towards good treatment and kindness and fairness, but you don't want your mind to be so agitated by holding on to hundreds of years of stuff. 1 day is enough to activate your heart to want to make people be kinder. You only need 1 instance or 10 instances. And then if you feel that suffering of another human being's suffering, then you want to end it, which is what compassion is. You want to cultivate compassion, not anger, and not systemic grievances. You want to feel we're alike. So if they hurt you, they're hurting a piece of me, and I'll choose 1 or 2 to try to make better. So that's my answer to that. The question is uncomfortable for me. How does one forgive oneself when another hates them? Ooh, that's a tough question. People can hate you and you've done nothing wrong. People hate. I did work with the Catholics and the Protestants in Northern Ireland. They hated each other. We're doing work now between Republicans and Democrats. We're trying to do some forgiveness stuff. They hate each other. They did a poll in Ivy League schools in 2016 when Trump was running against Hillary Clinton, and they found that close to 60% of Ivy League students who were Democrats would not live with a Trump supporter. So there's hatred everywhere. I don't know that you have to take responsibility because somebody has the perception of hatred. That's different than if you know you did harm. If you know you did harm, then it's incumbent on you to apologize, to make amends, and to change your behavior. But it doesn't have anything to do with their emotional status, because that's their thing, and it may not be accurate. I've been hated because I teach forgiveness. I have. I've been threatened because I teach forgiveness. If you did wrong, make it right. If you did wrong, humble yourself and apologize. If you did wrong, try to make yourself the person who doesn't do it again. But don't worry so much if somebody hates you. People will hate. Hate's a strong word, but people will not like you. Okay. How can one best balance the imperative of practicing forgiveness with the need for setting clear boundaries? Setting clear boundaries is more important than forgiveness. The problem is if you don't forgive, you don't always set clear boundaries. You set hostile boundaries, and they're not so clear. It's really important to set clear boundaries. That is more important than anything. You have to protect yourself. If people are harming your family, you need to do things for protection. Forgiveness cleans you inside so you can set those boundaries without hostility. You don't have to hate somebody to know you have to protect yourself for those ones you love. You can forgive people for being human beings who harm other human beings and do everything you can to try to protect them from doing it again without hostility and dislike. You know that. You can do that. Is forgiveness a type of healing? And if so, is it an action or a feeling? it's an action and a feeling and a cognition and a story. Forgiveness starts as a decision. I want to forgive this. It then goes to behaviors to make it real. The behaviors catalyze a change in feeling so you can move on it. It ends up finally as you don't tell a victim story, you tell a story of survival and courage and heroism and overcoming. That's what forgiveness is. This is just a comment. The kind of forgiveness you are talking about is not something bestowed on offenders, but rather something one does within one's heart. Yes and no. It is something you do within your own heart, and if safe, you bestow it on the offender. If not safe, you keep it here. So if somebody believes that you're evil or you don't deserve goodwill, then you can forgive them here, but it's probably in your best interest not to bring it up with them, and you can even break off contact with them, but still hold no bitterness. All right. One more. These are really nice. Most people are looking for the quick and easy way to solve complex issues, typically not realizing that doing so is a journey of indeterminate time that only begins with the adoption of such awareness and mastery. Describe, if any, the personal that started you on the path. Well, I did that. But let me tell you what this is, and this is where I'll stop. The heart of all change is practice. And you know that as well as I do. You got to sit there and meditate whether you want to or not. There's no shortcut. You can read all the books that you want. You can go to 1,000 Dharma talks. It don't mean that much. You got to practice. And you got to practice when it's easy, and you got to practice when it's hard, and you got to practice when you've had a fight with your partner, and you've got to practice when you're tired, and you got to practice when you're grouchy, and you got to practice when you're hungry if you want to get good at it. That's true for everything. Forgiveness requires practice. It requires quieting down inside, opening your heart back up, and little baby steps to inch yourself forward back into life. It takes practice. It just does. I haven't seen anything that doesn't benefit from practice, and practice shows what you really believe. You believe what you practice is what you believe in. So if every night you tell yourself, I want to meditate, but you go to sleep before it, you don't really believe in it. If you tell yourself you want to do it, but you watch TV every night, then you believe in TV. That's become my, as a therapist, a little bit, and as a teacher, what you practice matters. Anyway, I thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed this. I've always liked speaking on the island of Hawaii. There's a lovely receptivity to forgiveness and spiritually oriented things, and I've missed this. It's been 4 years. So thank you for your attention. And I do hope you pay attention to Susan or whatever about this conference, because we're really looking to start a series of conferences every year or two to really develop forgiveness in the Hawaiian culture. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Dr. Luskin.
Hey, Fred.
And as Fred said, we will be having a conference in 2024. Our agenda is full. People are coming from Australia to speak, Spain, and other locations, and across the United States. And Fred's coming back, and his colleagues are coming back. We'll also include attitudinal healing by Dr. Jerry Japolsky. So please join us. Thank you, everyone.